Hello and welcome back to Shulchan HaRav. We continue in Hilchos, Netilas, Yadaim, Siman Kuf Samach Beis, and we pick it up with Sif Yud Gimel. Kol tumas hamayim Yadaim, the tuma that we've been discussing regarding the water from the hands, Eina elamayim she'al hayad b'shas netila. It's only referring to the water that was on the hand at the time of the washing. She'oz b'kal nitmu hamayim bein mihamiyad atzma, because then it's easier for that water to become tamei either from the water that's on the hand itself, kigayin mayim yishonim, the first water, bein miyad hacheres, or some tamei from other hand that was tamei. Even if it's the second waters. The water that's not on the hand, even if tame hands come in contact with that water while someone's washing, that water it's not on your hands, it's not matama them. The only reason that you're not allowed to take water from someone's a handful of water, like someone cupped their hands and took water and put it on you, because that cupping hands is not a vessel. It's not because the water became tummy from that contact. And similarly, someone who leaves a bathroom, he could take water out of a fountain or some sort of water source, and the water that's left behind would be kosher. Like he was taking water from a bucket. That water that's remaining in the bucket is good for someone to wash with later. And even if the person who was washing at the time he was washing, he touched with his tame hands, he touched that water that's on the container, or within the container, whether it's before he washed it all, or whether it's before the second waters, that water in the vessel cannot become tummy from his hands. It's only the water on the hands that could become tummy. Therefore, kli shenikeh b'shulav, a kli that has a hole in the bottom, v'tachav boy barza, and someone like put a spigot in there, and then he pushed the water up through that spigot, and it came out through that that spigot, even though that spigot becomes wet from the water, he's touching that water with his tame hand, that water does not become tame. And he can now push it out through that hole, or through that spigot onto in a second hand, should not be shayna that he washed with the first water that he used from that spigot. Because that water, even though that hand was never washed with this water at all, that water is fine. Nevertheless, each hand needs to get a revius at the same time, or a large pouring that's as big as two, where you wouldn't need a second pouring, or to pour the first and the second water on this hand, and then right away pour the first and second waters on the other hand. If you do one on the one rishonim and then one on the first hand, and then rishonim on the second hand, and then you go back and do the second on the first hand and the second on the second hand, then you're going to touch that spigot with the wet hand from the first water, which is tamei water, and then that tamei water is going to touch the spigot. And then when you push it through, you push that water out again with onto your second hand, that water has now become tummy from the water that was on your hands that came in contact with that water, but then you have to dry it off and start over. And so to use a kli, also be careful with a container, a vessel that you're using, a cup that only has one handle. If you grab that handle with your wet hand that has tummy water on it, don't then grab it with the second hand, because that will now become tummy from the water that's on your first hand. If the handle was wet from tahor water, even if your tummy hands touch that, that doesn't matter. Even at the time of the washing, because that water that's on it didn't come from your hands. And even water that is on your hands that are tamei, they only become tamei at the time that you're washing for eating. Someone's hands who are wet from some other water that had nothing to do with him washing for a meal, and someone touched that water whose hands had already become clean for washing, Yadav Tahiris, his hands remain clean because that water had nothing to do with washing. It's only water from washing that becomes tameh when it touches your tameh hands, but not some other water that may have come in contact with your hands, not at the time of washing, not at the time of eating. Have a great day.